Often I've wondered, I look around at all these fancy, cool, beautiful vehicles. Look at these Maserati. We have an Alfa, a Maserati, another gorgeous Modena here, a Maserati Levante. Absolutely beautiful luxury vehicles. Obviously, we stroll along and we see more Alfas, we see Porsches, we see other vehicles, like the Land Rovers over here. You walk along and you see a lot of great, interesting vehicles. Look, we have Jaguars, we see all kinds of Range Rovers, Land Rovers. The list goes on. You could look down this lot or even look down over there and you see a whole pile of different luxury vehicles. And then it begs the question, why, when you have vehicles that are simple, Hondas, Toyotas, even Chevrolets and Kias and you name it, all the garden variety vehicles out there. We could even throw Volkswagen in the mix because that's not really considered a luxury vehicle either. A Civic, Toyota, or a Ford over there. We have an Escape. And then I walk and I see this whole barrage of Land Rover Defenders. And we know these aren't cheap. They're actually quite expensive. And on the other side, we see other brands. We've got BMWs, we've got Lexus, Infinitis. They're all luxury brands. Right there, Cadillac, as we go along there, take a look over at Cadillac. Look at the paint on this. Luxury vehicles do provide certain things. They provide, a lot more technology than you're going to get in a regular vehicle. In a lot of cases, skipping out on vehicles like this, the little Jeep, and you want a little more performance, you're going to have to step up to an Infiniti. Or BMW gives you a lot more performance and technology than they can maybe even afford to package up in a lower cost vehicle like a Honda Civic or an Accord, for example. But it raises the question, in today's day and age, in a land and a time of, the cost of inflation's on the rise, interest rates are on the rise, but even without that, those are out of necessity. But take that piece out of the equation, and I can't help but think why. I'm just in the same boat, but I have to ask the question, why do people feel compelled to buy luxury goods, luxury cars like this? Mercedes, we have all these luxury vehicles. Look at this Range Rover, absolutely gorgeous vehicle, beautiful. Look at that. So the list goes on and on. You can find luxury vehicles of all kinds of shapes and sizes. But then why would you buy that when you can buy simple vehicles like, a Volkswagen Jetta right here, or we have a Mazda 3, little Dodge Dart, quite simple right there. Here's a little Chevy Cruze. We won't talk about, reliability. That's not what we'll talk about today, but from an economic standpoint, we got a Ford Mustang. They're not really that high-end money, $1 a car either. But these Land Rovers kind of are, and Acuras are not. So, well, actually I shouldn't say that. Acuras are technically a luxury brand by Honda. But the question has to be asked, why do people buy luxury cars, luxury vehicles? There's a reason, there's a psychology behind that. And if you can get past that, then maybe you can decide whether you really do in fact need that luxury vehicle. I'm not here to say don't buy one. I'll be the first to line up for an opportunity to get behind the wheel of the latest Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren. I love my goods too, but everybody does it for different reasons. And you just have to ask yourself, is that the reason? And what is it the reason? If you really dig down deep, what are the reasons that people are buying luxury goods? When I say goods, I don't mean just cars. Chances are somebody who's driving this isn't wearing, flip-flops like that and cheap shorts. They're probably, in most cases, wearing suits and ties, and they probably got the expensive Rolex watch, and they probably have the Gucci handbag, and they have the $800 shoes. That's what they're buying. It all sort of goes together. It's a mindset, it's a psyche. And while some people have endless amounts of money, you think of some of the big billionaires on the planet, they can buy whatever they want, and some of them don't, but some of them can, and they do. Why do people buy luxury goods? There's a good conversation around this. First of all, we have to know that You know, buying a large luxury vehicle like that might cost you $150,000 or $200,000 could in fact create burden for you financially. You buy a Rolex for 15 or 20 grand. Did you really need that? I mean, 9 times out of 10, somebody wearing a knockoff can slip through the cracks there wearing the same vehicle, but it does give you the same feeling. Does it give you the same sort of self-worth? I mean, that's what a lot of these vehicles are there to do, is create a bit of a self-worth as well for some people. It's there to give people a feeling that maybe they fit in with the Joneses, or maybe they fit in certain circles. Like, for example, if you're a senior VP at a large corporation and you show up to meet up some clients in a 1997 Toyota Camry, what sort of picture does that paint? Other than really frugal, but sometimes you sort of need that, or it feels like you might need that for your operation or your business. The flip side is, if you're a garbage man and you show up one day and you have yourself a $200,000 BMW something or another, then you have to ask yourself, is that going to be kind of painting an odd picture? And did you do something like that just to kind of get yourself a little bit of a I told you so kind of scenario? And don't feel alone in that. I mean, we're all in this game together, and sometimes you just feel justified, vindicated. You worked hard all your life, so you feel like you deserve that, you know, that luxury good. But did you realize in 2022, approximately $242 billion was spent on luxury goods? And by year 2030, they're expecting it to actually rise all the way up to about $369 billion. And of that, about $115 billion is directly to apparel alone, so clothing and things like that. So clearly people are spending money, and they want to spend money, and honestly, that becomes a mindset. But just understand why you're doing it, and are you doing it for your reasons or the right reasons? And you don't need to justify it to anybody but yourself. But honestly, for me, you know, I look at a goods like this, it's an expensive SUV, and personally, there's nothing about this other than the fact it's very expensive that appeals to me. I don't want to spend $150,000 just to spend $150,000. I'm okay driving around in my 2003 Dodge Ram. But there's a reason I do buy certain expensive cars, and it's because of what they deliver. And it's not to show off and say the Joneses, but it's actually, in fact, to give me a thrill you can't get with anything else. You can't get that type of thrill by buying a 140 horsepower Honda. So, you know, buying a Ferrari or buying a McLaren is going to give you a different type of thrill. And I've always been a bit of a thrill seeker, and that's what it does for me personally. And did you realize consumer debt up this year in 2023 is up to about $986 billion? That's right, there's almost $1 trillion consumer debt racked up on credit cards just to get ahead of some of this. Now, we do know that unfortunately a lot of credit card debt is just staying afloat with today's times of, you know, high cost of living and housing costs and food elevating, escalating. People sometimes are having to put things on credit cards just to stay afloat. But the reality, we're at almost $1 trillion, and that does indicate that there's a lot of spend going on out there, a lot of which is luxury goods. I mean, some people believe that a $100 purse doesn't have the same quality as a $3,000 Gucci bag, when in a lot of cases, that's not necessarily the case. In some cases it is, and some people do justify that purchase by saying that the quality is higher. That may or may not be always the case. But here's another classic example. We have a Volvo that could literally be twice as much money when it was new as a Honda CR-V. Twice as much. Is it twice as much car? Well, physically, it's very comparable in terms of size. I would say the Volvo does provide more luxury. It's got leather interior. It's got a little bit more of the safety features than the Honda of the same era. So the Honda does do without a little bit of the technology as well. The performance isn't what it is in the Honda, so the Honda does with little less performance than the Volvo. So for people who value luxury over being absolute frugal, that's where that comes from. That's that differential in justification. They quantify luxury as quality. Now, you could make the argument that a Honda is much better quality than a Volvo. And I think there would be a lot of people that would agree with that idea. But again, quality is always quantified in a little different terms. Some people say quality is a vehicle that never breaks down and just goes and goes and goes, but that doesn't always mean quality either. Quality often means, you know, all this fancy finishing and technology, and that's a representation of quality, and that's how some people quantify it, but it's not always that way either. So do you prioritize reliability or do you prioritize features? Same thing with, you could talk about a Gucci handbag. You know, Gucci handbag, you know, they have people hand stitching those, so you might put value in that and say, hey, there was somebody stitching that by hand versus a machine. Some of these bags, the material's even the same, so it's hard to justify the material, but they might say, well, they were handmade versus machine made, so therefore it's better quality, and therefore people are just justifying it. Again, to each their own, but that's how people sort of get in this loop of justifying these luxury good purchases, whether it's bags, shoes, or luxury vehicles like this. Another reason why I think people sort of get caught up in the idea of buying luxury goods is there's the idea of self-esteem. They feel if they go out and they buy that $200,000, $300,000 car, that now all of a sudden they feel raised above. And that makes them feel good about themselves, at least for a bit. Now, you've got to know that every time you make a purchase, it's often based on a little bit of knee-jerk reaction. And so a lot of times people just, they feel good about it for 6 months, maybe a year, and then the warranty and the novelty wears out, and then they don't feel so great about it anymore. You know, do you feel better about buying that $200,000 car than you would if you slapped your money down, paid cash, and walked into the showroom and purchased this new Chevy Cruze? You probably would, right? Most people would think they feel like $1 million buying that new Range Rover, the experience. You know, you're treated like a king, you're in a showroom, they bring, you know, there's people around, they take your keys, they bring the vehicle up front, transfer the plates, they do all this paperwork, serve you beverages while you're in the waiting room. They do all these things to make you feel warm and fuzzy, whereas in a Chevy, you're kicking tires, a bunch of, you know, kind of loud screaming. You get snotty-nosed kids in the lobby, you get balloons, you get noise, you get a less luxurious experience. And so to some people, that makes them feel better. Going into a luxury luxury showroom somewhere and actually having that full experience, it actually makes them feel better. And that's again what some people thrive and they crave for. Again, not good or bad, but that's just part of the psyche and the psychology behind why people are buying luxury vehicles over something a little more garden variety, where the experience is basically in and out. Here's your money, take your keys. Now also, authenticity is another factor, and I use the example of a Mustang. That's a perfect example because some people want the look, the feel, the sensation. Hey, I've got myself a new Mustang. And they could get themselves into a turbo 4-cylinder, or they might get themselves a V6 back in the day, but they still get the same excitement personally that somebody who had to go and spend out quadruple the money and get themselves a Shelby. A GT350, for example, might cost way more money. And do they get way more out of it? Well, the person that justified the Shelby feels justified, vindicated, that it's more authentic, it's more high performance, it's more Mustang than even a V6 Mustang. But to the V6 Mustang buyer, it doesn't matter. They get the same experience. That's like the equivalent of this buyer buying potentially almost a knockoff Rolex that does all the same things. Keeps time, it looks the same, it even has the same lettering on it. But when somebody who buys the GT350 might see more value in saying there's nothing short of buying the best performing version of that, and therefore I've got to buy the real authentic Rolex. Or, you know, the feeling that they have to have the authentic piece. It has to be the best. It has to be that $5,000 purse. It has to be that premium luxury product. It can't be an everyday vehicle, even though the everyday vehicle worked just fine. You just have to ask yourself where your priorities lie. The sad reality is that a lot of people, they get caught up seeing the big fancy billboards, and they see the commercials, and they see all these rock stars, movie stars buying these kind of vehicles, and then feeling like, well, I could buy that if I take a third mortgage, I sell my other 3 cars, the kids can skip sports this year, and I might have to eat cat food for 6 months, but then I can buy one of these cars, and then we're good. And I'll only have $2,800 a month payments for the next 8 years to pay for that. Then we're good. Life's good. Life's grand. Whereas other people don't value that. They say, well, if I can't afford it and if I can't afford to pay cash, then I'm not buying it. So, you know, how much value do you put into luxury, and do you really need that luxury vehicle? How much is it just up here? because ultimately you're doing it for you. You drive a luxury vehicle like this, and nobody really sees you in there other than maybe, you know, a few people from work. Nobody really sees you or cares. You're driving down the road, nobody cares. There's lots of these vehicles around, and then the question just asked, you know, does it really matter what people care anyway? In 5 years, you're semi-retired because you played it right and you put the money in the bank, while they're all broke till they're 90 years old. And then, you know, that's just kind of the way the reality of this whole game works. So if you can afford it and it works for you and your environment, absolutely. I'll be the first to admit that luxury vehicles bring an essence. They bring the driving experience, they coddle you, they have better performance, better features, and a lot of times they are better, more reliable. A lot of times they're better quality, and they just have better safety technology built inside. So a lot of times, in fact, you're getting that much more vehicle. The real question is not whether you should buy one. The real question is, can you, easily afford that? Or are you going upside down in the means to try to do so for some other reason, whether it's, again, just to make yourself feel good for 5 minutes, or whether you just, want to do something that just looks like all the other movie stars are doing out there. So it's a great thing to actually have these vehicles. In fact, if you can afford them, but remember, repo rates are up right now aggressively. So as we look at the repossessions, there's lots of conversation about that, and people are getting too far upside down on their loans. People are going too far into hawk. Then they have to reprioritize because they refinance their mortgages. Then all of a sudden, because interest rates have risen in the last 6 months, they're having to actually double down, put maybe another $1,000 or $1,500 a month towards their mortgage because it got renewed at a higher interest rate, and now they can't afford that flashy new SUV, and they have to do something. They have to make a hard decision, and that's why repossession rates are up, sadly enough. So the real question is, do you or do you not, should you buy a luxury vehicle? And I really hope that helps everybody, just more from the thinking perspective. Is it a priority? Do you need it or do you want it? Where are you coming from with that? I really do hope, everyone, I'd love to hear your comments section down below. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this whole topic, because it's a hot one right now. People are going deep into debt, and the question should be, do you really need that item? And the bottom line is, I'd love for you to hit that subscribe button there, because I'm trying to grow the channel. Clearly, you're gonna get a lot of great content on this channel about buying cars, the things to do, not to do, when to buy, how to buy, the brands to avoid, and all the goodness. So hope to see each and every one in the next one. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.